All right, so I'm here with my buddy Lewis. It's one of my buddies from my fraternity. He also happens to be a poker player. So today we're gonna be going over some hands that he's played at 25 and 50 cent no limit, and we're gonna review it and see where we might find some things to do different and find out some hands that were played well as well. So, Lewis, you want to say hello?
Hey guys.
All right, cool. So right away we get dealt Queen 10 off suit on the button. For some reason the blinds aren't coming up in Holdem Manager, but that's okay. Imagine that there's 25 cents in front of club draw and 50 cents in front of the other dude. So why don't we see what happens here? Um, so you raise it up on the button, all looking pretty standard. Both the blinds come along. Now your opponent bets right out. So uh, for now, do you have any reads on this guy or notes or anything like that that you had at
Okay.
the time?
Yeah, just in terms of some general stats on this guy, club draw, over 380 hands, which are likely mostly all data mined. He's playing 14-7 with a 1.6 aggression factor.
Okay.
And I don't think I have any donk bet stats at the ready, but that's just like the pertinent information I think for.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely pretty pertinent. So it's interesting when you get a player who's generally been very tight, who bets right out into the field in a hand like this. What's your read when a guy makes a play like this?
Um, Kind of a weaker top pair holdings. It's I think it's kind of different. I'm not used to typically seeing guys as tight as this make
Hmm.
this kind of play.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
so maybe that kind of skews his range like more towards like the pocket threes or pocket sevens, but I don't want to necessarily put too much on that.
Yes, I think that you're right. And when you get a tight player, um, typically speaking, they won't do something out of the ordinary as a bluff just because they sort of know it looks bluffy. And I mean, yeah, he's betting into two opponents. Um, but a tight player does this to me, I'm pretty much instantly going to be putting him on a big draw like the ace high club draw.
Yeah.
Um, I don't even think he can have 4 or 5 of clubs if he's calling out of the small blind, considering that he's so tight.
Yeah.
Um, I think sets possible. I wouldn't put him really on a hand like Queen Jack because I think the tight players will tend to check and call those and sort of try to go for like a rope-a-dope type thing. So um, I would, if it were heads up, I would definitely throw in a lot more bluffs. But given that there's two players in the pot that he's pretty tight, I'm pretty much at this point putting him on a big draw or a set. So our combination work tells us that if he can call with down to like let's say ace eight of clubs or even ace seven of clubs, that we're in decent shape to call here. I don't think we need to fold right away.
Yeah.
So is it? What did you elect to do here? Do you remember?
Yeah, I decided to call his donk bet.
All right, that looks good. And then on the turn, he bets seven more. Now that's a really interesting bet. Um, so does that change your read at all when he bets the turn?
Well, so I don't know like how much he is necessarily like thinking about the kinds of hands that I'm holding, but
Right.
in terms of like my perception of his range, I think it strengthens it. I mean, I don't think I actually said flush draw for his possible donk holdings, but
Okay.
that ace certainly really hurts me, and it like in my opinion helps him.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I'll give you my perspective on it. If this were a guy who plays like a, 23-17 type style with a lot of blind defense, I would be basically calling down here unless a club came off,
Right.
because the ace is an excellent bluff card.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I would say like um, I don't want to give up when the obvious scare card comes on the turn. But on the flip side, this guy really is so tight that the ace is exactly what it is. It's a scary card for his range because if we even were ahead on the flop, that ace is a pretty awful card. So
Yeah.
given that, I'm not sure what you do here, but since it looks like the hand is over, I'm guessing you fold.
I do fold, yeah.
Yeah, I think it looks good. You know, and I think it's definitely worth noting this is totally a hand where your read completely changes the texture of the hand. Because when I looked at it at first, I was thinking that folding on the turn was a little weak. But given that, well, two factors. Number one, that he's so tight. Number two, you know, you had the 10 of clubs, so that also takes a lot of club hands out of his range, like 10-9, Jack-10, King-10.
Yeah.
And so, all those considered, I think that this was a time where folding looks pretty good. So,
All right.
congratulations on a well-played hand.
Thank you.
And I mean, it sucks to fold top pair sometimes, but I think this was a time where it looks pretty good. So.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the next one. This isn't it. There it is. Okay. So you get dealt two kings, and looks like you're in the small blind. You raise it up, and a guy calls. Now, do you have any stats on him?
Yes, I do. They're coming up right now. Okay, so generally, again, this guy is playing 20 VPIP, 12 PFR with a 1.1 aggression factor.
Okay. Over how many hands?
That's 335 hands.
Okay, now, do me a favor. Bring up... can you bring up his, like, raising c-bet stats, anything like that? Do you have those hands?
Yeah. Okay, so his raise c-bet on the flop is 17%.
Okay.
Over
so,
20
so
over a sample of 24.
Yeah, so he's a fairly aggressive player. I mean, he could have been running hot over that sample, but it sounds like given his pre-flop stats, combined with that raise stat, I would say that you know, he's not the type of guy where I'm just going to be putting him on the nuts. You know, if he, you know, this is it's a pretty bad flop for kings, but
Yeah.
You know, if he, let's say it was like Jack 6-5, I wouldn't be scared about a raise at all.
Yeah, agree.
So flop looks like a bet and a call, so pretty much totally standard. Jack comes off, it's a bet and a call. Now at this point, what sort of hands are you putting him on, given this flop and turn action?
Okay, so I think that come the turn, so I think when he flats the turn here, he's doing it with like any hand that was in his flop calling range is probably like still in his turn calling range, which is like a lot of pair plus draws, possibly two pairs sets. You know, like maybe it's possible he picked up some kind of backdoor flush draw, like a 6-8 of diamonds or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I think that your read sounds pretty good to me. I think you're exactly right. And the Jack basically doesn't change his range at all. And actually, when he calls, I feel like that gives us a lot of information, because against a fairly aggressive player, and especially I feel like in smaller stakes games, and definitely disagree with me here if I'm wrong, but I feel like in some smaller stakes games I've run across making videos that when guys turn draws, they tend to, especially the more aggressive players, they'll tend to raise them a lot of times. And so like when I see an opponent call on a Jack of Diamonds turn, I'm starting to feel like that sort of makes it a little less likely that he has a hand like 6-8 of diamonds. You know, and once again, I could be wrong. Also, just because, and I should say that from his perspective, I think that just calling with 6-8 of diamonds would be pretty good. But I feel like it just gets too tempting at that point, and I just see guys shoving it in, especially because the Jack is such a good card for you to just keep c-betting on.
Yeah.
But why don't you throw in your read?
Yeah, so like, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think it depends on position for these guys. Like, this guy's playing like the 2012, so he's, you know, he at least has some kind of idea of what he should be doing pre-flop, but like is clearly still like not all there yet. And
Yeah,
so,
that's a good point.
I mean, I think out of position, a guy like this is gonna make like the standard move, which is,
Hmm.
if he's got 6-6 here and he's out of position, he's gonna like check raise all in just because that's like what guys with aggression factors of 1.1 do on the turn in this spot.
Right.
But like, yeah, see, when he is in position, I don't know. I feel like I'm not like semi bluff raising the turn, even if my equity is like significantly higher than, 30% or so.
Right. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying for sure. So I think that I think I might agree with you in that maybe this player isn't raising the turn with the big draw here, like ace eight or six eight of diamonds.
Yeah.
I think that what you're, especially in position, I sort of like that thought because you're right. Out of position, um, he has to deal with stuff like if he doesn't make his flush, he might not get to bet it.
Yeah,
Or if he
exactly.
makes his flush, he might not get to bet it. But so yeah, I think that's right. But although I will disagree, I don't think that at this point when our opponent calls a turn, I don't think he can ever have two pair or better because um, that jack of diamonds and combined with the three straight on the flop, I think just makes it too scary. Like I don't think he's slow playing anymore.
Yeah.
And while I think it's possible on the flop, I just don't see it on the turn personally. I mean, you'll run into it very occasionally, and it's possible, but I don't think that that's. I wouldn't weight it very heavily in his range. Like if the river comes off, I don't know, let's say an offsuit queen, um, and he's like all in or something, I'm not putting him on a flop set personally, but
Okay.
so that's pretty much my read there. So the river's a two of diamonds, and you decide to bet 13. Do you want to? Why that bet size? I guess is my question.
Yeah, so um I guess well, see, yeah, so I mean, I guess at the time like I didn't know, but just trying to like think about it after the fact,
Hmm.
I felt like any kind of I thought this would have like a better chance of getting called by some of his like, top pair-ish type hands like
Right, like if he has Jack 8 or something.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I thought that this would, still get me paid if that was the case, but I don't know, maybe I could stand to bet like slightly less here because like if he shoves, then that's 1560 more into a pot of what becomes like close to 60, and I'll be getting 4-1 on my money. So, to only be good, you only need to be good 20% of the time. So,
Right, in which case, but then it's pretty rough though. Like if he does shove because you have to think, and for those of you watching at home, he does shove, and given the fact that you only need to be good 20% of the time, we need to start piecing together if we're good 20% of the time.
yeah,
Um, is this the type of guy that will all of a sudden turn 6-8 into a bluff if he didn't make the diamonds on the river?
I have to
I would
assume
say no.
no. Yeah, just like
Yeah,
his
I agree. I
1.1
agree.
aggression
Yeah.
factor is like, I mean, aggression factor, particularly on the river for guys who have low aggression factors, like
Hmm.
overall aggression factors, is like really, really telling information.
Yeah, I think so.
S-
I think I agree with you there. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think when he shoves this river here, like, as maybe implausible as it seems, as we're playing this hand out in real time, like,
Hmm.
I think, I think you just need to lay it down.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think I think I might agree with you. I don't think against this type of guy, and he also was in short too, so there's a fair chance that this was like his case money, and he was just like playing with the last bit in his account. And
Yeah.
I don't think. See, the difference to me is though, like let's say he had bought in full, um, and all other factors being equal, I think that something like betting 10 on the river here and calling a shove is very interesting because you're actually getting worse odds. But the thing is, in general, and this is I think is a pretty good rule, is that in general people won't bluff you as a raise on the river if they're giving you good odds to call.
Yeah.
So like if you bet and the guy is effectively just clicking raise, like not even all in because his raise is just basically doubling your bet,
Right.
the guy likes his hand. So I wouldn't rule out pocket twos on the river. I wouldn't. I think that something like ace eight or six eight of diamonds is by far the most likely. But on the flip side, let's say I was playing against like a tough regular at 5-10, or even just sort of like an erratic player who plays from time to time, but not all the time. I think betting half pot on the river here, you have to call if you get shoved on, because by betting half pot on the river, you're saying, "Look at me, I don't have a flush,"
Right.
because you would always bet more if you had the flush. So you're basically giving him that information, and I think the higher up in stakes you go, you'll find that people will take you up on that information a lot more.
Hmm.
So, but given that this guy had such a low aggression factor, his raise is basically a min raise on the river, and yes, the two is a scare card, but it's not like, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I think it is scary enough that you're probably not good 20% of the time here. And
Yeah.
for folks that are listening at home, if anyone plays these stakes and disagrees, we'd love to hear back from you. So, but given that, I think that initially when I first saw this hand, I was gonna tell you to call on the river, but I think I'm talking through it once again. I think I'm talked into this being a fold here. So.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely had to, think about it
Mm-hmm.
as it was playing out, but like, I think that's just like particularly folding like an unimproved kings and aces is something that you need to be able to do to be moving up.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's like, I would say, not folding them on the flop, but being able to fold them on the river is a distinction I would make. Like,
Yeah.
I think that if you are just like always getting married to them on the river, no matter what comes in small stakes games, you're going to be in big trouble. Because the thing is, I really do think, and I'll stand by this, in small stakes games, you don't really make all your money by being the one to call all in. Like you make your money. Now, like let's say there's a situation reverse and your opponent bet this river and you had kings and somehow hadn't raised or anything. I think raising would be a reasonable play. Because you're putting the last raise in, you're giving your opponent the chance to make a tough call. Whereas when your opponent's all in, he's saying, "I'm willing to put all my money in right now." So
Yeah. Actually, before we
sort of
close this, um, in terms of like an alternate line, if we go back to like the river action, what
right.
what do you think about like check calling? I mean, if he like, I don't know. I mean, I like to continue betting basically.
Yeah.
I think bet fold is like better than check call.
Yeah, I think checking is out of the question pretty much.
Okay.
Just because you're putting him on such a narrow range by checking, and it's just like it just gives him the chance to all day just check back his random fives, sixes, and sevens, or pocket eights, or like whatever nonsense he could have. So
Right.
I'm definitely not giving him. He's going to be checking back way, way more than he's going to be. And in fact, if I check and he bet, I'd be tempted to fold because I don't know what. I mean, I guess he could be value betting jack eight, so maybe not, but. I think that he'll call with so many hands that he'll check back,
Yeah.
and if you just bet and your read is good enough to fold, then I think you can get away with just betting here.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
So, but yeah, otherwise I think it looks pretty good.
All right.
Is this the next one on your list here?
King Jack. Yes, I'll pull it
Yeah,
up
okay.
right now.
Great. All right, so in this one you're dealt little king jack suited, and once again we don't see blinds, but you're in the small blind, and a guy called Ardes Chain 85 raises in middle position to isolate a limper. Any reads on this guy?
Yep, it's just popping up right now.
Great.
Okay. He over 143 hands. He's playing 1915 with a 2.8 aggression factor.
Okay, so he's pretty much a. Would you say that's like pretty much standard for a regular at these stakes?
I would, yeah.
Okay, great.
And this
Um,
dude who limped, this dude Big Duke who limped under the gun. Just for the record, only 26 hands, but he's playing 31-8.
yeah, he's a garbage factor. There's no
Yes,
doubt about that.
yes,
So I like your call for what it's worth, unless Merciless is super squeezy or whatever from the big blind. But even then, I think that you need to give yourself a chance to get in this pot.
yeah.
So okay, let's check out the flop action here. Um, I mean, it looks pretty standard from here. Did you consider raising at all, or
Um,
just calling all day?
I think I'm probably just calling the majority of the time.
Yeah, I'm calling basically every single time, unless I have history with the guy where he sees me as really bluffy.
Yeah,
And I don't think a lot of players at these stakes are going to be all about like, just trying to go buck crazy, rebluffing with just like, you know, an underpair to the jack or whatever. So
yeah.
I think check call is super duper standard. But I did have questions about the turn here. So you check and he bets 750 now. Um, I guess my question is here, and for those wondering, you decide to raise. Can you just talk me through your thought process there in the raise?
Yeah, so um I think at the time I was maybe inappropriately thinking about more kind of range balancing with my check raise on the turn here. And I mean that's not always necessary at this limit. Um but I feel like these kind of I don't want to say this is a semi bluff because I mean I think I likely have the best hand right now.
Well, you're certainly not bluffing at all. I mean,
No.
he's not folding a better hand, so
Yeah.
um, it's not really a semi bluff. So
Yeah. Um so yeah, I mean I guess just for I mean I guess I mean technically I guess it's like a value raise, but you know, what is he ever gonna call here with?
yeah, then that's sort of my thinking, and not to put you on the spot there, but it's just like this is a situation that I see. I see players make this move against me a lot of times, and for me, it's just like just asking to get your money in bad or getting your opponent to stop bluffing. Because the big issue here is that on a Jack 4-4 board against a tougher player, which it sounds like he is, it's really sort of nice here to have King Jack, because King Jack is kind of the top of your range. I mean, besides Ace Jack on a flop like this. And so I often like to just check call, and then also not to mention the fact that like if the Ace of Diamonds comes off on the river, or Queen, or even any diamond on the river, you're really giving your opponent huge incentive to bluff. So I think that we're really giving up on a big opportunity by raising here, because likewise, your opponent, you can basically never be pure bluffing.
Right.
Um, and it's really hard for you to be semi-bluffing without the jack, because I mean, what could you have? I mean, there's just really nothing you can have unless you have like Ace Queen of Diamonds or something.
Yeah.
And you just decided to peel one off on the flop. So I think from that perspective, like this is definitely a chance where, even though you're out of position, I think it really is a good chance just to call it and let him, you know, just see if he'll give it a ride on whatever comes off on the river.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yep.
So you decide to raise, and he pitches it. So, and just to be clear, I think that there are certainly times where raising a picked up draw on the turn is good. Although I don't know, it's sort of hard to say. So okay, so let me put it this way. So let's say the board, instead of like Jack 4-4-6, is something like, on the flop it's like Jack 6-4, and you have, let's say, and Jack 6-4 with two suits out there, and you have like the the 10-9 of the suit that's out. So you're not necessarily rushing to just like jam it in right away. You basically just have a naked flush draw at this point.
Hmm.
You're out of position. You decide to check and call. Now the turn is an offsuit queen. This is a spot where I really like a check raise, and I think it's really appropriate because your opponent's going to be firing on that card all the time. As a bluff, since it's a perceived scare card, since it's an overcard of the board.
Right.
Also, the card can realistically have improved your hand because a queen has come off. So you could have had queen jack or whatever. And so while you're still semi-bluffing in that case, obviously, I think I still really like it because you're both you're credibly representing an improved hand while also still having the backup plan of outs if your opponent indeed does have a hand,
Right.
And you're also, as opposed to just checking and calling in that spot, because then you just wind up losing to like ace high and random shit on the river or like pocket eights when they would have definitely folded had you raised the turn,
Yep.
So I'm not against semi-bluffing the turn altogether, but when you just have so much showdown value, I think that's a spot where I'm liking to just let him bluff or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
So that was sort of my thoughts on this.
Okay, yeah.
And let's see. Is this the next one that you got? Or am I missing one? Is it this one?
The ace jack off. Well, let me pull it up. What day is that from? Oh no. Okay, yep, I can pull this one up.
Which one, ace jack or king 10?
King 10. Is that all right?
Great. Yep.
Okay.
So you get dealt a bit of king 10 off suit. Okay, so right away, let's get a read on the button player here, if you have it.
Yeah. It's just popping up. Okay. The button, only 14 hands, but 77-38 infinite aggression factor.
Okay, and the big blind?
25-21, 1.9 aggression factor, and that's over 2,400 hands.
And what about 3-bet stats? Do you have any on the big blind?
Yes. He's 6.6%, and that's, in well over 400 opportunities to 3-bet.
Gotcha. Okay, so right away I would say I'd be raising the small blind here. You have two big cards, a very poor player on the button. You have an aggressive player in the big blind, but I still think it's a great spot to get it heads up with a guy who you are going to be wanting it heads up against, So
Yeah.
So that's just the first. It's a small point though, compared to what would happen later on. And unfortunately, we see his cards.
Yeah.
But so you bet out, and he decides to call. Now the turn is an interesting spot, because now when he's called the flop, what sort of range are you putting him on? Like in general, obviously, he can have his sets.
Right.
What's a generic range?
Yeah, so basically like any kind of weaker, I mean, the two pairs, the king 4, king 5, maybe 4-5.
So you think he can have like a king 4 suited something?
Yeah, I mean, just because like it was limped, he just checked it from the big blind. So, I mean, I think literally like anything is possible.
Oh, right, it was limped. I forgot about that. Okay, cool.
So yeah, so like, maybe he's got a 6-7 in there, and he can, that's why he's calling the flops. It'll just take one off in position. Any worse king, I'd have to assume I would think that king jack or better, he would probably be raising up.
Right.
But like king 4, king 5, I'd say are definitely in his range at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good read. So yeah, that's true that he can have any king. That definitely changes things a little bit. So my read on this hand is a lot of players from your small blind spot on here on such a dry flop will just like lead anything. So my read when he calls the flop is basically any pair. So
Yeah.
Given that read, I'm not so sure. Okay, so if we put him on a range like any pair, then we have to sort of deconstruct that range and start to think like how much of that range are we ahead of that can also call two more streets and and evaluate it like that because he's a decent player, you know.
Yeah.
If it were RD4s in the big blind and he had called, I would just be pound pound pound.
Yep.
But against a decent player, I think I'm taking the opportunity here to just basically think I'm getting one more street, you know, because unless you guys have history where he thinks you're bluffy, you know, which does happen from time to time, obviously,
Hmm.
then I think that since we're only going to get one more street, you know, if we're actually, in most cases, I should say, you know, he can have King 8, King 7, stuff like that.
Right.
Um, but that makes me inclined to check here, in general. But I mean, betting can't be awful, but that's more because I think he'll fold than anything else.
Yeah.
So you decide to go ahead and bet, and now he raises. And so, what's your thought process now?
So, so basically my thought process was that, like, you know, he could, I mean, I was pretty much putting him on one of these, like, weird two-pair type hands.
Yeah, like 9-5.
Yeah, or, you know, King 5, King 4, maybe, you know, like maybe he turns the King 9. But, you know, at the same time, like I'm considering sets here, but like I don't know. I was just like not weighing it as much.
I wouldn't be. Yeah, I wouldn't be weighting his range heavily towards sets at all. I find that people generally just raise those up when someone limps the button, especially aggressive players.
Yeah.
I would have basically ruled that out. On the flip side, though, um, I'm tempted to a lot of times just fold right away here because I think that at small stakes, a lot of players sort of stick to the adage of like don't go broke in a limped pot, you know.
Yeah.
And when he raises here, I'm really giving him two pair basically.
Right.
And you know, you may know better than I do about what the bluffing that goes on, but you know, this isn't like 25.50 or 500,000 with Phil Ivey. You know, this is like 25 and 50 cents, and,
Yeah.
and this guy is Sticky S or whatever his name is, and so he's like a sticky seat. So he's sending you a huge message of strength. And now, if we think about it this way, so given your turn call, and we look at the river, to call that turn bet, you needed to basically have a few things really in your favor. You needed to, first of all, for him not to have a set. But furthermore, you also need him to have a hand like King 9, King 5, and King 4. And you want to basically just improve specifically to your 10, because you're definitely not getting paid off if he has like, not, you know, 9-5 and a 4 rolls off on the river. You check, he just checks it back.
Yeah.
And and on top of that, if he has like 6-7 or something, which is basically a prayer, my guess is that you weren't planning to call an improved, right?
That's
If like the
yeah.
river was a jack or something.
Right.
Okay.
If I had bricked the river, I was just gonna check fold.
Right. So given that those factors, I think this was a spot to just fight another day.
Yeah.
But it is tough in this spot. I mean, you're getting what? I guess there's like 15 in there, and it's 5 to call. But clearly, that those just aren't the odds to improve to 2 pair. So.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, basically, like at the time, I was just so set on him like having two pair that I figured the implied odds of calling like the 550 more to win like the rest of his stack if I did spike the 10 were like good enough, because I mean I figured he's going to be betting the river basically no matter what the river is. Right. After this raise. And like I mean I certainly agree with you that this raise here denotes a lot of strength, but and I mean I guess I'm not giving it enough credit seeing as we were in a limped pot, but I feel like turn raises compared to turn check raises are like not necessarily as strong.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a fair read um, regarding the strength. I guess the last comment I would make on it, though, is that the odds to hit because you're effectively looking for three cards on the river.
Yeah.
I don't even think you do have the implied odds there, and not to mention, obviously, I think we both agree you can heavily discount it. But the fact that the reverse implied odds of him having a set obviously suck bad when you make your 10.
Yeah.
And and by the way, check raising is clearly the play here on the river.
Right.
And but you know the problem, of course, as always, is like I'll talk myself into strange calls like this for all the time, and I basically universally regret it because what happens more often than not is like the river is an 8 and I check and he's betting big and I'm folding or calling and getting shown the nuts. You know,
Yeah.
so I think in general, you know, it just goes back to that idea we've been stressing a lot, which is to not be the one calling the raises with marginal hands in these small stakes games. You know,
Right.
it's generally, you know, you'll make good money by bluffing. You'll make good money by getting value from guys who can't lay down a hand. Um, but as far as being the one calling with just top pair, it's often a fast track to disaster.
Yeah.
So this one didn't work out, but you know, it's not at the end of the world or anything. But I think that you know, drawing to two pair on the flop can be a good way to just get your ass handed to you sometimes, so, or two pair on the turn. So,
Yeah.
okay. Now this was just an ace jack hand you had here,
Yeah.
and this guy I believe just limp calls the small blind and flops eight. By the way, do you have any fast reads on this guy?
Yeah, they're just popping up right now. Yeah, sorry about that. Just
That's no problem. I'll just cut this part out.
once. Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, so this is Dasberg, right? Okay. Over 45 hands, he's playing a 47-9 with a 1.5 aggression factor.
Okay, so he's basically a great spot.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't want to spend too much time on this hand because it was fairly standard stuff, but I think it illustrates one good point. Here on the turn, I thought this was a really nice spot to continue the betting. Just because a guy like this, was just, I mean, I figured after I saw the hand when he check called with King 9 on this flop, and once again, I should not be showing the known hold cards, but when he check raises this turn here, and to such a small amount, I mean, you're not absolutely thrilled with your hand or anything, but against a guy like that, his range is just so littered with like 7-8 with a random club and 10-9 with a club and just like all sorts of garbage that I think this is a spot where you do really give up value by checking back. So
Yeah, see. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like it's just definitely tough because like I see these guys, with these really low aggression factors and I see them making these turn check raises and like, him limp calling pre-flop. I certainly can't like completely I mean, as much as I am including, the said garbage in his range, like you can't completely discount, the random like 2-5 of clubs or like 4-5 of clubs that he's like
no, certainly not.
playing here. So
Well, here's the issue though with using aggression factor with guys that play really loose. Is an aggression factor is a percentage based stat. So like, for instance, okay, let's say that you go to the flop with just 5% of your hands, aces and kings and queens, and that's it.
yeah,
Now, naturally, on the flop, you're just going to be pretty aggressive because you're going to usually have an overpair or a set.
right,
So you're in a great position to be betting and raising and carrying on, and your aggression factor is going to be through the roof because you had such a strong range going there. Now, on the flip side, if you play 50% of your hands and you're oftentimes not the pre-flop raiser, you're just not going to have that high of an aggression factor because you're going to have shit like 2-6 on an ace king jack board.
Yeah.
So how aggressive can you really be? You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's like, an aggression factor that would be low on a guy who plays 15% of his hands can actually be just like astronomical on a guy who plays 50 or 60 or 70 or 80% of their hands.
Right. Right.
So I think that aggression factor is not the most useful stat when dealing with super loose guys. I tend to think that just really loose guys, they fall into two categories: passive and erratic, basically.
Hmm.
And the passive guys in general will you'll just know it. Like you'll find them limping around with like ace queen and just like check calling down on a queen high board. And then the erratic guys, they're the guys that are just like check min raising you and then just check and giving up on the river, and they had like undercarts of the board. Like I think that the loose guys, they show their true colors a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
But mostly I wanted to say that since this guy my guess was that he was a really loose guy. I think that this was a spot where I do really like a turn bet, because I think that you wind up really giving up a ton of value if he has, and not to mention you give him a chance to catch up if he does have a lot of those pair and gutter hands, which he can have.
Hmm.
So, given that he check raised, it's just 7 more into 25. So I mean, you need, if you know for a fact you're behind, you need 4.5 to 1 or whatever to call. But you certainly don't know for a fact that you're behind. So I think that calling is totally standard here. When the river comes in ace, he bails you out by checking. But I think it's interesting on the river if he bets. Like, what was your plan if he bet 20 on the river here?
It's it's hard to say. I mean, I feel like in the heat of it, I probably I would have seriously considered folding, but I probably would have called.
Yeah, I'm calling fast for sure. If he bets some amount on the river, I mean, because I'm not even ruling out an ace for him.
Yeah.
Um, so like an ace 8 or something. So I mean, I'm not going to love it, but once again, when we're calling bets that are less than pot size, when we call a pot size bet on the river, we only need to be good a third of the time
Right.
to make our money back. So when we're calling a 20 into 50, we're just getting a great price. And when you're dealing with such an erratic player, even if you wouldn't bet even money on it, you don't need even money. That's like the thing with dealing with aggressive players is you have the odds to call even if you don't think there's more than 50% chance. So
Yeah.
you know, the hand ends and he shows you the king 9, so
And
it worked out pretty well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's certainly not a bad pot to win, but I guess I don't know. I mean, I think now that we know what he has, I mean, it's easy to say, but I think when this kind of guy, and maybe this is where his aggression factor does come into play, is on this river, you know, when he
Right.
checks the river, I think this guy, he's playing 47-9, 1.5. I think when this guy checks the river, that's really indicative of him just giving up. And I mean, I don't know, maybe he doesn't call a bet.
Oh yeah, you're talking about whether or not you should have bet on this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe I'm losing some value there.
Yeah, you're probably right, actually. I mean, I think when he checks this river, I would be giving him a hand like I talked about, like a 7-8 with a club, stuff like that. I wouldn't bet big at all. I would bet 5.
Yeah, yeah, a third of the
And
pot or less, something like that.
oh yeah, yeah, less than a third. I would bet less than 10 all day, because a guy like this will talk himself into a call with all sorts of nonsense
Yeah.
when you make a play like that. And I think that that it really is a really good spot to just get another couple bucks.
Yeah, for sure.
Because he might call you with king high, to be honest with you, if you bet $5.
Right,
So,
yeah, exactly. And I mean, that certainly starts to add up.
absolutely. Well, $5 is a ton. That's 10 big blinds.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. Otherwise, you're right. I think that it is a clear bet on the river. That's a really good point. But
Yeah.
otherwise, it looks pretty good.
All right.
To wrap up this segment, we might turn it into a 2-part video for you guys watching at home, and we look forward to feedback. And we'll catch you next time.